Hello, my name is Dr. Shelly Harrell, and I am honored to be here at the 2020 Global Stress Summit and share some of my work with you. Um, I'd like to share a bit about things I've been working on to understand, address, and heal racial stress and collective intergenerational trauma. So, stress is not just individual, but it's collective. And racial stress is one of those expressions of stress that's experienced by groups of people based on shared characteristics. So, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the nature of racial stress, and then share with you some ideas and practices for working with it, with ourselves, and perhaps for participating in the healing of others. So let me go ahead and share my screen and go to these slides. All right. Here we go. Okay, so the title of the presentation is Toward Healing Racial Stress and Intergenerational Trauma, Contemplative, Communal, and Empowerment Processes. And this is the model that I'm going to offer and suggest some ways to use that model of contemplative, communal, and empowerment processes as a guide. All right. So I want to start with this paraphrase of this, of Cluck, Hogan, and Murray, who were anthropologists from 1953. And so my paraphrase of what they've written is, we are each at the same time, like all others, some others, and no others. And I like to start with this quote when I talk about issues of human diversity, of sometimes difficult to hold topics of our racial and ethnic and cultural differences. To emphasize that when we think about who we are as human beings, right? There are ways that we just share this common humanity. We are on a shared journey of being human in this world, and all of its challenges and peaks and valleys, love, pain, suffering, joy, right? All of that is part of our shared humanity. And so we have the capacity to connect with every other human being on the planet, and to support and help each other with our stressors and challenges. So that aspect of our humanness, our collective and shared humanity, is so important. And then the bottom aspect there, we are like no others. We are all amazing, unique individuals, right? And we want to be seen for our uniqueness and not, assumed to be reflections of overgeneralized stereotypes, and we want to be valued for our uniqueness. So both of those are important. We are like all others and we are like no others. But it's that middle part that we struggle with, I think. We are like some others, right? Our diversity, our group identities, the way that we are different from each other. And so when we understand that we need to hold all of this at the same time, one does not cancel out the other, right? So affirming the nature of our lived experience that's part of our group identities, that's part of ways that we may be different from each other, that does not cancel out what we share, right? Our shared humanity. And it does not cancel out our uniquenesses, kind of what we bring as unique beings to the world. But in this presentation, I'm focused more on the middle part of our lived experience, right? The ways that our differences show up, and particularly with race and ethnicity. So when we think about stress and human diversity, right? just like those three levels of human experience, stress shows up in universal ways, group specific ways, and of course, personally. And, our stressors vary based on who we are in the world, depending on who and where we are in the world. So just the example of, women and men experience different stressors, right? So, and then women in different parts of the world have different stressors depending on the status of women's equality and justice, right? So who we are impacts our stress, right? And not only that, impacts our coping. So different stressors may benefit from different coping strategies, different resilience strategies. And some may work better with some stressors than others, and some may be more available and accessible to some groups than others, right? So it's I think what's really kind of an important take home about these initial slides is that it's not a one size fits all when we talk about stress, when we talk about stress management, right? That we need to tune into the needs of individuals, right? The uniqueness of individuals, tune into our own unique and individual needs, as well as to things we share with groups of people where we may have common experiences and shared characteristics that may be different from others, as well as the universal aspects of stress, fight, flight, freeze, all of the things that it is infused in the experience of stress for us all, but not assume that one size fits all. So we think about racial stress, which is that an expression of that group level of collective stress, right? So what are some ways of thinking about and understanding stress, different types of racial stress? And I have a couple of pages at the end of the presentation, and you'll get the slides or have access to the slides with a lot of references, and you'll see a paper that I wrote on different types of race-related stress. So I want to refer you to that and not spend a whole lot of time here, but suffice it to say there are a lot of different ways we experience racial stress, right? In life events such as discrimination, what's talked about as microaggressions, those daily, sometimes subtle ways that knives are thrown, so to speak. Vicarious racism with social media, just witnessing acts of racism, police violence, other kinds of potentially kind of race-related events that we have access to. So direct witnessing of enacted racism, and then the kind of chronic and collective ways that racism shows up in differences in health or educational opportunities or employment or criminal justice system, et cetera. So those are in that chronic and collective category. And then this notion of transgenerational transmission of race-related or racism-related trauma. And I want to spend an additional moment here, and the importance of understanding how racism affects us currently is also rooted in an understanding of how that has emerged from racism over time. Right. So the ongoing ways that these historical traumas show up, and there's actually a lot of research on these transgenerational effects of historical traumas, and I have a laundry list here, which is not at all complete. Unfortunately, we have numerous examples of how we can be horrible in our treatment of each other as human beings, from enslavement to genocide to Holocaust to internment to colonization and violent kind of taking over of other people's lands, ethnic cleansing, apartheid. There are just so many examples. And we have to be able to see and name these and understand how they kind of continue to show up in different ways. And also the characteristics of those historical traumas that have ongoing effects. I've listed some things here in terms of threats to safety, right, that continue over time. Loss and grief, not just loss of persons through death, but through separation, loss of a sense of place and community. I mentioned emotional availability, and I'll talk about this more. One way that kind of these intergenerational collective historical traumas affect us is through, people who have maybe been more directly affected, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, coping in some ways by shutting down emotionally. Sometimes when things are so horrible, the way we cope is to shut down emotionally, and that makes us less emotionally available to others. Disconnection from community, disconnection from cultural resources for healing. And these things get passed down. So understanding, kind of current exposure to the types of racial stresses I mentioned, actual events of discrimination and others, but also, really getting clarity around the ways that these collective historical traumas continue to show up. So racial stress incorporates all of that. And just like with any source of stress, we are better prepared to cope and to build resilience when we see it clearly, right? When we face it clearly, right? So denying, minimizing, trying to push things away, is not a great stress management strategy with any type of stress, right? And we want to bring that wisdom to bear, and that knowledge to bear in how we think about ways to address and heal in the context of racial stress and trauma. So I use the term collective wisdom when I talk about quotes, and I like to share quotes, and I think about it as collective because it's an individual who maybe put that specific, kind of order of words together. But part of why quotes resonate so much with us is because they touch something deeper, some deeper knowing that we have that is beyond just those words that individual used. And in the service of time, I'm not going to read each of these quotes, but I offer them to you to kind of get a sense of some of the ways and that racial stress can impact people. And that Bob Marley redemption song, and the line from there, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our minds. So understanding that racial stress can have a mental cognitive impact, right? That kind of internalizing messages of that are kind of originated in the context of racism can be really devastating to a sense of positive esteem, sense of one's value and worth, and we can believe some of those externally defined kind of negative stereotypes. And when those are taken in, then there's not a lot of activity towards our own well-being and liberation because of internalizing negative stereotypes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this notion of breaking out of our mental emotional prison, healing from lies that we've told ourselves and ones that have been told to us, all of that wisdom informs the impact, understanding the impact of racial stress, and gives us a little window into how we can begin to heal, with attention to better awareness of how our thinking and our emotions and are impacted by racial stress. So the next couple of slides, again, this reflects some research, and I want to keep being mindful of our time here. So I'm not going to go over each one of these points, but there's study after study that documents the impact of racism on physical health, from blood pressure to immune functioning, as well as vulnerability to numerous mental health outcomes, depression, PTSD, anxiety, etc. So the impact of racism-related stress on our physical and mental and emotional experience is well documented, and kind of gives a foundation for why it's really important to pay attention to it. So we think about the mental, the emotional, the physical, but there's also kind of the level of the soul, right? So oppression, racism's impact on the soul is can be conceptualized as an assault on what enlivens and connects us to others. Right? So we saw in that previous slide that one of the effects of collective traumas has often been separation, right? Separation from a sense of belonging and connectedness, from resources, from support, from community, from culture, right? And so the notion that culture is part of the soul, and that racism affects us at that deep level, right? So the authors have talked about this in terms of soul detachment. We can get alienated from ourselves and our connection from others. Soul murder, that one way that racism affects us is shutting down our aliveness, shutting down our emotions, putting a wall up, be very disconnected from our emotions. And that's for protection, we do that in the context of numerous types of stressors, sort of shut down emotional experience. Soul wounds, right? And that's specifically speaking of spiritual, cultural effects of historical and collective trauma, right? Disrupting that mind, body, spirit connectedness. It's a disconnection and damage that's done. So we really want to understand the effects of racism-related stress, not just physically, mentally, but also at that level of soul, that level of our deepest connectedness to ourselves, and that resonates and connects us to a larger whole. So this notion of cultural soul wounds, that is really, again, referring to that collective part of ourselves, who we are, that holds that place of deep relationship with persons, places, practices, spirit, with resources, with ways of being that are part of our culture. And so disconnection from that is devastating. There's a real sense of alienation that can occur, and it makes us more vulnerable to internalized racism, right? So that's what I was mentioning before, believing societal messages about one's own or one's group inferiority or deviance, believing the negative stereotypes, right? Devaluing one's own group and idealizing other groups, right? Particularly in the context of racial oppression, idealizing white people, white persons, right? Seeking approval from white persons, right? So that there's a sense that my group is not as good, and so I'm going to seek approval and value, right? whiteness and what is represented and symbolized in whiteness more than my own group. That's an evidence or a reflection of internalized racism. And it's again a way people manage stress, right? So believing one's own group is deserving of bad treatment. So this level of understanding of racism-related stress is important because it has implications for coping. It has implications for managing stress and building resilience, right? So attending to the impact on the mind, on mental processes, on emotion, but also at this deep level of sense of self as valued and sense of self as a part of a community, of a collective, of a larger whole, that is wounded by racial oppression. So important themes for healing: acknowledgement and validation of experience, providing opportunities for people to feel seen and heard, right? Part of how racial stress and trauma impact is a silencing, a devaluing of our own voice, right? Becoming invisible, hiding parts of ourselves, right? So providing opportunities for standing in our own voice and truth is an important coping opportunities to open up. Themes related to healing that involve countering exclusion and by providing opportunities for connecting to one's group, in providing opportunities in that next bullet point for affirming of one's humanity, countering dehumanization and otherness and othering, right? And also being aware and considering power asymmetries, injustices, and the disparities that exist, right? We have to face things in order to have a hope of changing them, and being aware also of obstacles and barriers and challenges is part of being prepared and resilient. Arming ourselves in a sense with awareness, knowledge, information, and bringing to bear support that can provide affirmation of our experience, affirmation of our humanity, right? That those themes are just woven in to strategies that are going to really be effective in addressing this particular type of stress. So what I want to offer, again, let me check the time again. So what I want to offer are 3 core healing processes. And this is actually part of a bigger model, right? And I'm applying it to racial stress. And I call it the triadic change model, and talk about it as these 3 pillars of healing, resilience, and positive well-being. So again, I want to refer you to some of the references if you want to read about this more, but these 3 processes, right? We can even think about this as like a stool, and that middle piece there is the seat of the stool, right? Personal, relational, collective, healing, resilience, and well-being is the seat of the stool. And in order for that to be supported, in order for us to be able to have that foundation, right, we need these legs, or these pillars of awareness, allies, and action. So contemplative processes we can think about as awareness, communal as allies, empowerment as action, right? So the broader model is the importance of bringing to stress management strategies that reflect each of these things. And so we want to look at that specifically to how do we think about awareness, allies, and action in the context of racial stress and trauma. We also, if we look at just the margins of the model, biopsychorelational factors, multicultural factors, socioecological factors, those are just a reminder that this stool rests, right, in an environment where we need to consider those variables. And it's not a one size fits all, right? So we need to think about what's going on with that individual person biologically, relationally, psychologically. We understand culture, we understand the specific environment so that we can develop practices, identify practices for ourselves and perhaps in the support of others, right, that take those things into account. The next 3 slides just kind of break down awareness, allies, and action, right? And just give some ideas of the kinds of practices, the kinds of strategies that we can bring to bear to build each one of these legs, strengthen these pillars for ourselves and others. So with awareness, we're trying to enhance experiential awareness as well as critical consciousness and meditation, things like journaling to explore and process our lived experience. With communal processes, right? Allies, we want to strengthen connectedness, mobilize support, deepen relational engagement, and that connectedness could be in many, many different ways. You know, thinking about connection to persons, groups, places, our culture, ancestors, right? Drawing strength and connection there. Development of affirming, validating, inclusive environments, etc. But we're strengthening connectedness. So again, the first two pillars that we need to build on, right? We need to build upon are contemplative processes, awareness, communal processes, allies. The third is empowerment processes, action, facilitate agency, right? Facilitate a sense that we can be effective, right? Creativity, motivation, and commitment, right? That we're thinking of how can we enhance a sense of action that is emancipatory, right? That gives a sense of freedom, that has a collective component in the service of not just our own coping and resilience, but that of others, and transformative in some way, right? So this is empowerment processes as an action component. So what I offer is these 3 questions to bring to bear to any stressor, and particularly I want to look at how we can bring these 3 questions to racial stress, right? Racial stress and trauma. So the first question, what am I experiencing? What can I be aware of that needs my attention? And then creating strategies to open space to explore that, right? To explore, what am I really experiencing? What will I connect with? And what choices will I make? Now, I'm also making available a worksheet, which I'll share with you briefly. Let me go into this other screen here. Okay. So this is the worksheet. And as you see, it's divided into these 3 areas where we can really explore, what am I experiencing? What will I connect with? What choices will I make? And there's, some hints and guidance on how to explore each of these questions. And in the bottom row is where you would take notes and begin to generate practices that can be used to address the stressor challenge. Again, it's not a one size fit all. So we want to take these questions and encourage kind of the individualizing of the coping and resilience strategies in the context of a particular stressor. So again, you can explore this worksheet more. I am going to stop this share and go back into the slide presentation here. And sorry, I didn't move us to the Okay, so let me get us back into this 3 questions from current slide. Here we go. All right. So again, then we want to think about this general model, this integrative model of managing stress and trauma. How do we look at those 3 questions, those 3 pillars in the context of racial stress and trauma? Right? So awareness, what am I experiencing in the context of racism? Right? Where do I need to attend to that I might be minimizing or denying? How can I open some space to really connect with what I'm experiencing and processing that? Right? Who and what can I connect with where I feel seen and heard in my full humanity? So in the context of racial stress, that building opportunities to strengthen communal affirmation and belonging is so important. And then in the context of action, right? Emphasis on intentional, empowered choices in the context of obstacles and barriers and perhaps discouragement that may be faced related to racism. Right. So again, we have to face things and be aware of things. And this is true of any stressor. We need to we need to have some awareness of what some of the potential obstacles are so that we can anticipate and prepare ourselves to manage challenges in our lives. And as I talked about before, in a collective type of stress, like racial stress, we also want to think about collective action and collective empowerment. Right? So I also want to offer this attention to racial healing and resilience that emphasizes a notion of soulfulness. So the previous slide a little earlier really kind of said we need to attend not just to the mental and emotional mental health, physical health impacts of racism that have been documented, but also to those soul wounds, right? That soul detachment or soul murder with respect to disconnection from our emotion, right? So it requires this kind of bringing in and developing and adopting strategies that connect us to a deep knowing of our value and worth. Because we have to counter in racial stress, racial healing from racial stress, we have to counter these messages, right? That we are somehow inferior or deviant, right? And so this idea of soulfulness is in part connecting to a deep knowing of our value and worth, a deep sense of our aliveness. Starts connecting to cultural strengths and wisdom, being awakened, right? Not allowing our emotions to be killed in sort of bell hooks frame, right? But part of what I would say is an important act of resistance is staying alive, not just physically, but in our inner world, keeping our inner world alive. So opportunities to be moved and touched and keep our emotions alive. Opportunities for resonance with shared human experience. And a lot of times, incorporating music, dance, poetry, et cetera, is really valuable and helpful to kind of trigger that kind of soul connection. Right? I often refer to James Brown's song, I Got Soul, I'm Super Bad, that to communicate, kind of what are the qualities of soulfulness, and just translating some of the lyrics of that song. And I got something that makes me want to shout. I am connected to an inner aliveness that's compelled into expression. That inner aliveness is a core of soulfulness, right? And it's that soulfulness that we want to bring to our coping and to our resilience, particularly in the context of racial stress. I got something that tells me what it's all about. I'm connected to an inner wisdom where I can find personal and collective truths, right? Tells me what it's all about. I can find that in myself. There's an inner wisdom I have, right? I got soul. I'm connected to the deepest essence of my being, that energy that stirs and moves me. And we all know what that feels like for our souls to be touched, right? And come alive. And I'm super bad, right? I know my innate dignity and worth, that I am a person of value with gifts to share in the world. So next time you listen to James Brown, or, intentionally put this song on, right? Super bad. And hear the lyrics a little differently, inviting you into connecting soulfully, right? And that piece is so important in coping and resilience in the context of racial stress. Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, has a take on soul that I think is highlights another important dimensions. Well, I think soul is certainly a feeling that is transmitted in one way or another, something that's very empathetic, and it's deep. Soul is deep. So she's emphasizing the connectedness and communal nature of soul and soulfulness, that it is about our collective self being in resonance with the collective selves of others, right? So it's transmitted. There's a resonance that brings our souls alive, right? So again, you'll have access to the slides. I want to be aware of our time and offer you some more specifics in terms of practices. Again, I love quotes. So, these quotes on this page point to a hopefulness, point to the resilience of the soul, that when we have contact with the soul, there's no such force as the force of a person determined to rise. The human soul cannot be permanently chained. Right? The soul's guiding light still shines no matter the extent of our collective blindness. At any moment and any time, we can turn towards this light to renew our spirits and restore our souls. And that is the hopefulness and what we can look towards in integrating this notion of soulfulness into coping and resilience in the context of racial stress. So I want to look at and just a little glimpse as I prepare to kind of come to a close, a little glimpse of strategies within each of those three process areas of our model: contemplative, communal, and empowerment, right? So awareness strategies, ally strategies, action strategies. So when I think about a soulfulness oriented approach to contemplative practice, we're creating an opportunity to listen in to the whisperings of the soul. One of the things that racism does, it creates a lot of noise, creates a lot of distraction, a lot of stuff that kind of pulls attention, right? And so it's particularly important to provide some opportunities to listen in, right, to the whisperings of the soul, to access the healing reservoir within, right? And know that that's there and available, right? To nurture it, to cultivate it, because sometimes the support isn't as available in the world, right? So what I'll use are guided meditations to facilitate this, right? To facilitate seeing how we may be internalizing, dehumanizing messages of racial inferiority or racial self-hatred, guided meditations that emphasize freedom from these chains and shackles of internalized racism, emancipation from mental slavery, creating a space to contact our emotions, to contact our aliveness, to move against perhaps that tendency to numb out or shut down emotional experiencing. And I've developed this process that is built into guided meditation. So not just only meditation as stop and relax, but meditation as taking what Tara Brach calls a sacred pause, creating space, right, to take a break from the noise and to kind of be clear about what we've internalized, to get grounded and centered. And then the drop is really dropping down into that deepest level of our experiencing, right? Where we're connected to the core of our being, where we have the capacity for attunement and resonance and deep connectedness with others, and where we have the opportunity to metabolize some of our lived experience, right? We need to drop down deep to metabolize that. And metabolism is taking, elements and, processing them for them to be usable, right? So we need to take those stressors and challenges and experiences and have an opportunity to drop down so that we can process and inquire and transform them into ways that we can be in the world from a place of strength and value and etc. And then the roll, the stop, drop, and roll, right? So the roll is taking that what we have metabolized and what is usable and rolling that into our lives so that we show up in a more empowered way. We show up in a way that has a sense of freedom from those mental slavery dynamics and chains internally and walls emotionally, feeling freedom from those things so that we can live in a more empowered way. And this slide is a meditation, a guided meditation practice on soul. And each letter of the word is kind of expanded upon to sort of invite us into that soul level experiencing, to that contact with soul. So I would do this more slowly with more time, but let's just kind of engage this practice for a moment. So I invite you to just get comfortable. And if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, you can do that. If not, that's fine as well. So just start by taking a few breaths and just begin to allow these words to fall on your heart and become infused at a level of your soul. So soul, S, sense the call of the stirrings of your soul, allowing yourself to hear its whispers and feel the dynamic and divine flow of what is moving within you. O, open yourself to connect with the deepest essence of your being, experiencing your inner aliveness as you awaken and bear witness to the truths of your lived experience. Open. U is uncover. Uncover what might be buried, masked, or hidden. Release all that you have internalized that degrades you or holds you down or separates you from your value, worth, and humanity. Continue to discern and illuminate truth and wisdom, welcoming what you uncover with courage and gratitude. And L, liberate. Liberate your soul's calling and wisdom, freeing its emanating energy into expression as you participate in the emancipation of yourself and others, allowing the aliveness within you to actualize its highest manifestation. Soul, sense, open, uncover, liberate. So that's just an example of a guided meditation to facilitate that kind of soul contact, that soul level of experiencing, that way of being present with what's happening more deeply. Communal practice. It's a practice that I've developed called SAWUBONA, and it's inspired by the South African greeting of SAWUBONA, which means I see you. And so the emphasis of this practice, it's a communal practice. So the emphasis is on deepening relational connection through truly seeing, hearing, feeling the soul of another. And I typically do it in a group context, right? Where people rotate partners and provide a SAWUBONA greeting, right, to that partner. Just stand face to face and really bring this sense of I see you presence to the other, right? And it can also be done as a guided meditation. So when we think about SAWUBONA, it's really about being present, fully present with another person in a way that sees behind, beneath, and beyond appearances. It's an affirmation of our connectedness with each other, with community, with our ancestors. You know, it's about resisting participation in dehumanizing each other, right? The dynamics of oppression that see us not as whole beings, but being seen, heard fully, right? In the fullness of our humanity, right? That we are more than stereotypes or our conditions. And so this bringing this energy of SAWUBONA to ourselves, right? We can greet ourselves also, right? And sometimes we do that with the guided meditation, and bringing the energy of SAWUBONA to others in this group activity. So, you know, I invite you to I'm going to just do a very brief reading of some of the SAWUBONA phrases, and invite you to bring someone to mind, right, that cares for you, and or who you feel a caring energy from. So if no one, you know, kind of fully feels like right in this moment, you can also bring to mind someone you don't know, but who represents a caring spirit for you. For me, that's often Maya Angelou, right? Or bring to mind a spiritual figure of some form, right? Human or transcendent, right? And imagine this person's voice speaking these phrases to you. Right? I see you. I see you behind the walls you have put up and the masks you have put on. I see your humanity. I see beneath superficial impressions, beneath stereotypes, projections, and expectations. I see you beyond your conditions and circumstances. I see you at your best, manifesting your greatest purpose and soul calling. I hear you. I hear you behind what has been silenced and hidden. I hear you beneath what you say, beneath the words you use, the language you speak. I hear the voice of your deepest intentions. I hear you with ears tuned in to the whisperings of soul and truth of the heart. I feel you. I feel you behind the visible and invisible barriers that may separate us, beneath our differences, in that space of our interconnectedness. I feel you beyond what I can put into words. I feel your rhythm, your vibe, your unique expression and energy. I feel your vulnerability and your victories, your struggles and your strengths, your tears and your triumphs, your regrets and your risings. I see you, I hear you, I feel you. Okay. So in the communal way of doing this activity, you're actually in contact with another person and speaking these words, right, in the energy that you bring in greeting each person in the room with some SAWUBONA phrase, right? So the last activity is an empowerment practice, and I'll just kind of briefly describe this one. It's called Soul Circle Gathering, and basically the idea is kind of gathering inner resources of power, motivation, and direction, right, as they may be symbolized in persons, symbols, etc., and really creating a space to hear those messages and guidance, and that's followed by a process. We actually this is a visualization exercise. Bring the people symbols into a circle in our visualization, and that's followed by processing the messages that you receive, right? The empowerment messages you receive that then, you know, kind of could inform choices and actions. So it really emphasizes kind of translating and the fuel that we get from these inner resources and translating that into actions in the world. And I want to close with this soulfulness communal chant, right? And I'm gonna share these phrases. Sometimes that the repeating of messages to ourselves really affirms them, right? Really affirms them and can influence how we kind of what we bring to the challenges of our lives. So you can feel free to chant along with me, or just listen to the phrases. We see it to free it. We feel it to heal it. We name it to reclaim it. We go through it to get to it. We liberate, we invigorate to liberate. So thank you. Thank you for attending this presentation. My contact information is here, my email, website, Facebook, Instagram, and I also have these references, some things that I've written as well as other selected references. So feel free to access these slides and contact me if you want to touch base further about the content. So again, thank you for being here, and enjoy the other amazing presentations at this Global Stress Summit. Take care.